large rural districts encompassing significant swaths of federal land. Decisions pertaining to their management affect our constituents' everyday lives. I sponsored the Arizona Land Sovereignty Act, H.R. 1495, because the decision to set aside large tracts of land should be made with public input, with transparency, and with the cooperation of stakeholders. Right now, the President of the United States can, with the stroke of a pen and without consulting the public or public representatives, lock up millions of acres of land. As I travel across my more than 50,000 square mile district, I hear concerns about access to our public lands in nearly every corner of the district. Rural Arizona communities depend on the multiple use of public lands for their livelihoods. These uses include domestic energy production, timber harvesting, grazing, hunting, fishing, and family recreation. Too often we find that some federal land designations are causing endless bureaucratic delays, litigation, and restrictions that could completely lock up much of the large and needed store of wealth and recreational opportunities our vast system of public lands can provide. In a district like mine, dominated by federally administered lands, these burdens disproportionately stifle economic productivity, leading to some of the highest unemployment rates in the country, and in some cases threatening the ability of the affected communities to provide public education and other basic services to their residents. When Congress abdicated its duty to designate national monuments and gave this power to the President via the Antiquities Act of 1906, Congress never intended the President to use the authority the way it has been utilized in recent years. At the time the law was enacted over concerns about protecting mostly prehistoric Indian ruins and artifacts, collectively called antiquities, our federal lands in the West. In fact, presidents have used the authority to protect small acreage in my state for this purpose. For example, in 1909, President William Howard Taft designated 360 acres in northern Arizona as the Navajo National Monument. By definition, these emergency declarations were only supposed to be small sites, the smallest area compatible with preserving the antiquity. Up until 2000, the act was generally used in that manner. 12 of the 13 monuments in Arizona designated under the Antiquities Act were under 36,000 acres. Combined, those 12 monuments encompassed only about 68,000 acres. Ironically, the one exception, the 330,000-acre Organ Pipe National Monument designated by FDR, has been subject to extensive review of this committee over the past 3 years due to the negative impacts the designation has had on border security efforts in my state. At the tail end of the Clinton administration, President Clinton designated 5 national monuments encompassing over 2 million acres, nearly 3% of the land in the entire state. In one strike of the pen, the President unilaterally dictated how 3% of the land in the entire state would be managed without any public input. When you consider that less than 20% of the land in Arizona is under private ownership, these designations have a major impact on the state's economic potential. We have found that when public is not included in land management decisions, it leads to conflict and, in many cases, litigation. For example, on the Sonoran Desert National Monument, environmental groups are suing the Bureau of Land Management over the decision to allow livestock grazing on the monument, even though the 2001 designation allowed for some grazing. The groups are asserting that as a monument, the land should not be managed on a multiple-use basis. The ambiguity of an Antiquities Act designation is likely going to cost the government a lot of money in legal fees and ultimately could threaten the cattle industry west of Phoenix. The Arizona Land Sovereignty Act is not an attack on national monuments. Many of the 18 Arizona national monuments play an important role in the preservation of our culture and in my state's robust tourism economy. I appreciate the need for protection of the sites. However, the public deserves the opportunity to have their voices heard. No president, no matter what party, should have the authority to unilaterally decide how millions of acres of land in any state should be managed. I am currently working on legislation with one of my Arizona colleagues to modestly expand the boundaries of the Casa Grande Ruins National Monument to provide necessary room for more cultural growth and discovery on the site. We are carefully working with all stakeholders to avoid conflicts, and I am confident that we have broad bipartisan local support within the communities. That is how the national monument process should work. Congressional authority to establish these lands designation is an integral part of the transparent and public process that will ensure a designation is not only appropriate but accepted by our constituents. Thank you again for allowing me to participate in today's hearing. I look forward to continuing the work to reform the national monument designation process. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate that. I also want to ask unanimous consent that a statement by Representative